friends and viewers, today we are having a discussion on the Hindu uh, cultural awareness in North America, or the Hindu culture in North America. Brief commentary, and I have my friend. His name is Vibhuti Jha. Many of you know him, and he is an excellent communicator and represents Hindu dharmic issues in one of the best possible ways. So I'm really honored to have him here. And it will be a discussion. As you all know, I'm not a professional interviewer. I do it for Hindu Dharma's sake and discussing relevant issues that affect our Hindu community in North America. So without having you wait longer, so I'll introduce you to my friend and colleague, Shri Vibhuti Jha. Namaskar, Vibhuti ji.
Namaste, namaste, Aditya. You have a wonderful name because that's name. My son also has the same name, Aditya. So, I will not treat you like my son, but you are just like my son in that sense. So, regardless of our age differences. With that said, thank you very much for having me over here. And, if curiosity didn't kill the cat, I'm very enthusiastically keen to know how did you migrate from technology to, talking about Hindu Dharma? Because that connects with me. Because when I came to this country, I'll give you a little bit of a backdrop of that. Because when I came to this country way back in 1991, and I don't know where you were and what you were doing at that time, in 1991, my primary role was to market India in this part of the world, to talk about India's liberalization program. I was a banker. I was with American Express Bank. Prior to that, I had a compliance, no KYC, and all those experiences from Reserve Bank of India. So when I came here in 91, I had the onerous task of marketing and drumming up business interests for India when India had no story to tell. If you remember 1991, we were belly up.
Yeah.
We had to auction gold reserves to get $2 billion worth of IMF credit, cutting across that. So that was a very difficult time. I'm proud to say that I belong to a band of a few good men who brought the India story successfully to this side of the world. So I feel proud about that, belonging to the band of a few good men. And so the point which I'm trying to drive you at is that when you make and meet people to talk about investing in India, the American mind is a very curiosity-driven mind. They ask you questions.
That's right.
And in the process, I realized that there is so little I know about my own self, my religion, the way we are, because we take all these things for granted. So I would say that I became a better Hindu, a better human, a better Indian, and a much bigger fighter for my country back home than in India, because now I'm a US citizen. Doesn't mean I have abandoned my love for the country, because I still do a lot of business between India and the US. So I became a better Hindu, and I realized that there are so many glorious features of our faith that we are ourselves unaware of. Or if we are aware of, we just take it for granted. And one thing which I'll share with you comes right on top of my mind is the entire process of meditation. This became very dear to me because I had, despite being in bank, dealing with ultra wealthy people, I have a very strong spiritual streak in me.
Okay.
And in that process, I wanted to learn TM. And that was in Bangalore. I was a young banker. So I went to the TM guru to teach me. And that's a very profound moment in my life. And he told me that do 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening. And I said, sorry, I don't have that much time. A classic, typical, arrogant young man who thought that the world will collapse if he stopped working. And then this particular Guruji, with a smile on his face, with a very gentle appearance, he said to me, young man, if you were to vanish from the face of this earth this very moment, do you think anything is going to change? And that was a real hard punch on my nose. And I realized that Reserve Bank has 10,000, 15,000 offices. If I'm gone tomorrow, they will find more than 100 people to fill my seat. So my ahankar, my so-called arrogance received a big blow. And I came down on the planet Earth. And that's the time when you learn things that, yes, you are not indispensable.
Correct.
TM I learned, came to the US, and I was delighted to see that how transcendental meditation, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi had made transcendental meditation as an institutional framework. And that's my realization that we Hindus had everything in our literature, in our texts, in our work, but we were not following anything. And that takes me back to 1983 in RBI Bankers Club. There was said that Indians do not need to go to Ivy League schools to learn the lessons of life and management. If you studied, and that was the word that he used, if you studied Mahabharata and Gita and Ramayana, if you studied, that was the focus. If you studied, all the management lessons are right there.
That's right.
So that's a little bit of my background. From banking, I transitioned into many more things, but this attracted a lot more because that's who I am as a Hindu.
That's
Your
right.
story from technology to this part, I would love to hear that.
My story is very uneventful. So let me just point back to your last comments. So based on your energy and everything, what I feel is that you're 16 years old. You have not aged even one day after that. Is that right?
Yeah, I have not aged. I'll tell you the reason. I'll tell you the reason after you finish your story. That's a very, very poignant observation you made, and I want to compliment you for that. There is a reason for that. I'll tell you that. Yes, go ahead.
So I made this transition from business to, actually I never made a transition. I'm doing both, and but I focus more on this aspect where I'm promoting healthy values, Hindu values, and the reading of our literatures, because like you said, the Ramayana, Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, and all these literatures, where I call them Sattology. I invented that term, and the reason is I invented that term is that because the Western academicians, they used to use they're using the term mythology for all our Vedic literatures. And if you look at the etymology of mythology, myth is a Sanskrit word which means imaginary, and Sat is a Sanskrit word that means is truth. So mythology means, and logos is a Latin word which means a science or a study. And so if you combine the two words myth and logos, it becomes mythology, which means the study of myth or imagination, and or the science of imagination. And so therefore we have to have a true antonym of mythology, because we have ample of evidences of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and also the proof is there. Anyone who follows Bhagavad Gita can remove anxiety, can remove all the mental depression, and also become very happy if you follow Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita is not some mythology, but actually it's a science manual. I consider it as a science, because you can use Bhagavad Gita to make your life better, and you can see that in your own life. And I'm not saying as a religious person or as a some kind of dogmatic dogmas, because Bhagavad Gita, whatever every word you can practice. So anything which you can actually experiment based on the theory, it is not considered just a theory now, it's a science. And so Mahabharata, Ramayana, and our Vedic literatures are a science, because everything can be proved, and anything else which is not connected to them is a mythology, because it's based on dogmas, and that cannot be proved by a scientific experimentation, unlike Vedic literatures. So that was the reason I wrote 4 books so far, and it's just the count is going to increase. And actually I have more books in the pipeline than the publishers can publish. And so therefore I have to slow down. I was supposed to release 4 books during COVID-19, this quarantine, but publishers said you have to pace it out, otherwise they won't sell or people won't read it. So that's the story, and I'm still in a tech industry. I'm still promoting many companies, At the same time, I'm doing Sattology, which is the project of my heart. And I think it will make a significant contribution to the lives of millions of people who have yet not been introduced to Vedic culture or are practicing Vedic culture, and or yeah, they're trying to learn more about it. That's my small intro.
No, that's absolutely brilliant, and that you can write books and that you are an author and a writer is a great enabler to reach out to people. And that's congratulations to you to have spotted that talent in yourself. And but talking about Mahabharata and Gita and Ramayana, as you said, that's what is they teach you in universal principles. They do not teach you that it's a religious thing. There is nothing good and bad. They have shown what good behavior is, what sacrifice is, what deception means.
Okay.
That's the real life. At least I learned that love, hate, right? Deception, honesty, integrity, lack of it. These are all part of human dimensions and human behavior, selfishness or unselfishness.
That's
People
right.
act according to whatever is good for them, and they choose to act in a particular way. What is important here is that how Mahabharata and Ramcharitmanas teaches us that everything that you do has a consequence.
Yes.
Everything has a consequence, and that consequence has its own outcome. So
Yes.
Bhishma Pitama or many gurus who sided with Kaurav, they did it as per a karmic influence, and they had to go through the process of their own action. Their action produced a particular set of actions. So this is what is important to realize, and that's where I realized that Sanatana Dharma and universal principles are eternal. And there is a reason why they are eternal. Because they are gender neutral, because they are, they don't discriminate. They are not race. This is race neutral. So neutrality of Sanatana Dharma is what the world is looking at. And if you wanted to correlate it, I said it 3 weeks ago about in one of my programs talking to a doctor. I said, isn't this curious that this coronavirus has taught us one clear thing? It is gender neutral, caste neutral, color neutral, age neutral, rich and poor neutral, boundary neutral, right? No, church is closed, Mecca is closed, temples are closed. And it has also brought to us a sense that a God is different, and so is religion.
Absolutely.
God created us, and he created the life-sustaining forces that we have through sun's energy, water, air, and many more things in nature, right? Right? So no God has ever discriminated. God is equal. For him, it is one sun, one air, one water.
Absolutely.
The point is how we, the people, created religion based on fear and ignorance. And that's what is happening in the modern world. You technology guys, and myself as a banker who finance some of the technology companies, we are dispelling that ignorance.
That's right.
Now we know that thunder and lightning doesn't happen because Gabbar Singh is coming, or gods are angry. Or we know that gender determination is a responsibility of men, not women. There are certain universal truths we know now. These smart tools that we are using now, they were not made by God. You can call it God-inspired, but it is made by humans who are performing God's jobs to do things. So God is within us, and that. So you talked about my saying that my enthusiasm. This is a very important lesson for every parent, especially Indians, because we are very attached to our children, and I think everybody is. I'm not saying that others are not, but when we come to this country, we like to give directions to our children.
That's right.
When I came here in '91, I was in Los Angeles. You know LA that way, which was a Star Trek place, and we came from fresh off the boat. And that was the time when I realized that my son, I have to become a friend and buddy to him. I can't be, and I don't want to be his quote unquote a traditional Indian father. I have told you this, you do that. I said this to you, you must follow it. No, I gave him full freedom as a young man growing up with him. And I'm honestly confessing that what you see the youth in me is because I have grown up again. So this is my second 30th year of life, if I may say so. So I've grown up with him because I decided to be his buddy, grew up with him again, became a young man again, and began to address his concerns the way I had felt. And I just like I told him, that you are very lucky, your generation, that you have the whole world at your fingertips, literally, right? We belong to a generation where we had no such knowledge, access to such knowledge, but we used intellect or intuitive capacity. You use your fingers and visual, but it will take you 30 years to gain 30 years of experience. So use me.
That's right. So one of the things like we see today in the society, and you live in the East Coast and I'm on the West Coast, and so literally two ends of the United States, literally. And so one of the things we have seen is that there has been a lot of per se attacks on the cultural some symbols of Hindus. A lot of attacks have been there in terms of writing wrong history, and these are academic, I would say more academic insinuations, wrong history being written, and which all of us oppose. And obviously as Sattology, we're challenging that a lot. And also the phenomenon of uh, people not belonging to Hindu tradition teaching Hinduism in the Western universities, and that is a big no in many ways, because a person who doesn't have a faith in our Vedic culture, Vedic texts, and how can they claim to be in an authority on those texts which are based on scientific realization and not based on dogmatic thoughts? I mean, like for example, I can say very clearly, Dr. Francis Clooney from Howard, and he has written a book on Ramanujacharya, translated something, without being part of Sri Sampradaya, even though he may have done out of academic interest, but without following the tradition of Sri Sampradaya, how can someone comment on our Vedic gurus and Vedic translation? That is a biggest question I have to such people. Do you think in a similar way, or do you have other opinion on that, on this phenomena?
This is a very, very important thing, and you have hit upon a classic problem we Hindus face, is the fact that there are very few spokespeople from our faith, because our history, our traditions are known to the West the way West tells them as to what it is.
Right.
And that's the biggest flaw. I'm a great believer in taking responsibility part. And I say, let us assume that responsibility, that because there are not enough scholars or spokespeople or teachers who have done adequate research to qualify to be a professor in Harvard or Indian universities, wherever, that's the problem that we are facing. So I believe in the word called narrative. Our narrative is remarkably poor. Our narrative is what the Westerns tell us or what the Islamic people tell us. And I have had the privilege, and I'll tell you this very proudly, that, in as many years of my conversations with investors and others, when we sit down over a drink and talk about Hindu culture, Hindu belief, Hindu gods, I've begun to address those questions the way they must understand. To put it into our very Sanskrit words, they may not get it. But if you explain it to them the way they want to, then things become easier. So we need to develop people within our own faith. And you are doing a great job. I've asked for your book, and I've asked for your book, and apparently Amazon Prime is backed up. So I asked my son today, and I read a lot. So I every day you talked about Gita and everything else. I'm very happy to share with you and your audiences that I read 2 shloks of Bhagavad Gita every night. It kind of solves my problem.
That's
And
right.
I don't do in a historic way that I have to read one after another. I before sleeping, I just open the page, whichever page comes in, even if it comes the 10th time, I read it. I read 2 shlokas and I go to sleep and I have a solution, eureka kind of a solution. Okay, Mamra solved. Likewise, Ramcharitmanas. You read the page. The thing is that to stay engaged, we Indians lost our own engagement with our own faith. And we do not engage with the Western people because we don't know how to engage. We lost our footage on that basis. That is very important. And I totally agree with you that we have to remain engaged. And I believe that there is one benefit of doubt here I'll give to those people who are espousing or taking up Hindu studies or whatever in foreign universities, that at least say, unless and until you misrepresent, you're okay. So if there is somebody who takes up that word, whether it is 2 people I know, there's so many, like for the Dr. Conrad Ernst, for example, he studied in Banaras Hindu University. I wouldn't say that he is not a Hindu, so he's unqualified. I interviewed him. I think your viewers should go to YouTube, frankly speaking, and see his interview with me, my conversation with him. And he's coming again, but after this coronavirus, we will talk about his new book, and we'll talk about it. Conrad Else is there, Maria Wirtz is there, and there are several others who are doing a great job. Let's embrace them. That's the beauty of our. You disprove, reject you after that. So the choice of rejecting or accepting always ought to be with us. And to that end, I will say, hats off to those who have taken up the study. But where we need to be careful at this point in time is that we keep an eye that they do not misrepresent what is ours from their bias. So if they have a biased agenda, let's expose them. Absolutely. I believe in that. You got to call them out.
Absolutely.
But generally speaking, I would say thank you very much. It's a good word.
It's a pleasure. And viewers, this is a discussion we'll continue with Vibhuti Jha and me. Do follow him on Twitter and Facebook, wherever you can find him. Vibhuti and last name Jha. And so he's very articulate, way more articulate than me. And but we'll continue discussing these topics. And today we just introduced. It's the first one. This show is Frankly Speaking, and I don't have yet a name of this show other than Sattology show. So please continue watching and sharing your views and serving the big dharmic community of American Hindus. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And as a reciprocity, I'll say, come on my program for 45 minutes and we'll talk about your work that you are doing. Thank you.
Anytime. Thank you. Namaskar.
Namaskar.